Hello and welcome to yet another Housing.com webinar. Our topic of discussion today actually revolves around two questions that often intersect in the mind of prospective home buyers. And these two questions are, should I continue staying on rent or should I buy my own house? It's not an easy question to answer. I'm Jhumur, Ghosh, editor-in-chief Housing.com News, and here to help us assess options between renting and buying a house, we are joined by our panelist, Sanjay Garyali, who's a business head for housing finance and emerging market mortgages for the Kotak Mahindra Bank. Sanjay, welcome.
Thank you, Jhumur. Great to be here with you.
Absolutely. Great to see you again. Rajan Sood is the business head for PropTiger.com. Rajan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jhumur. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So this evaluation that, we're trying to make between renting and buying a house, what I'd like to understand is, are we saying that one choice is necessarily better than the other? One is the right choice, one is the wrong choice. How are we assessing these two options? Sanjay, I'd like to start with your assessment.
Yeah, sure, Jhumur. I think very pertinent question, irrespective of where one is in phase of life. So I think clearly there are two clear aspects. One is the emotional angle. On the emotional angle, hands down, go ahead and buy. You want to have a house which you own. There are lovely memories associated. You don't want a landlord chasing you every 2 years to vacate your house. So from a pure emotional angle, hands down, it's a buy. On the financial angle, I think this is the point where this is like different strokes for different folks. And people need to customize for themselves. So what are you looking for? Are you looking from a pure financial angle? It's an asset class where the risks are much lower, and the pandemic has shown that. So if you're looking at a principal protection, if you're looking at an asset class where the risks are much lower, could be maybe in 3 years, 4 years time, it may give you lower returns, but at least your principal is protected. And then the second part, which is return on investment. So I think this is a very individualistic on the financial side, and it's not a clear decision. But I think what a person wants, whether you want principal protection versus you want a higher ROI, is what could take the decision for an individual.
All right. Rajan, how do you make the assessment? How do they stack up against each other?
Yeah, I agree with Sanjay's point of view. See, the efficacy of owning versus renting is largely dependent on the market conditions, to my mind. See, in a rapidly rising real estate market, owning makes a lot of sense. And on the other hand, when you think there is not much a scope for property price appreciation, I think renting perhaps comes out as a better option. Right? So in order to take this decision, so it's not an easy one. It's a very difficult decision to be taken. But there are a few thumb rules which somebody can follow. Right. Okay. So in case there is someone who has already made up his mind to stay in a particular city for, say, 10 years, then from a convenience point of view, I think it makes a lot of sense to buy a house. Right. And even from the investment part of it. So in case it's a financial decision that somebody is taking, then in case this investment is expected to give you a better return than the loan rate or any other alternate investment which you can think of, then you should buy a property. Okay. Right. Yeah. So, and additionally, also, I think, decision to buy a house should be based on the financial sustainability also. Okay. Right. So if somebody is emotionally and financially ready to buy a house, then one must go in for that. Okay. And finally, again, coming back to that emotional point, which Sanjay also mentioned, most of us have been brought up in an environment wherein we give a lot of importance to owning a house. There is a sense of pride. There is a sense of ownership attached to it. Right. So maybe one needs to pay an EMI for 15, 20 years, but ultimately no rent needs to be paid. And you live in a house of your own.
Okay. So, if I were to sort of ask you to put on your financial thinking cap, and if I just keep aside the point of the security, etc., the way the market condition is right now, the real estate rates, the home finance rates, just the, what's happening in the job market. If I were to ask you, right now, in this moment, what makes pure financial sense? Would you go with rent or would you go with buy? Sanjay, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, I think if I were to look at it as an individual, if my job is stable, if I'm in a stable sector in COVID, if I'm not too impacted and the affordability exists, the real estate prices have been stable or are actually down for the last, this is the lowest ever real estate price for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So even if last 5 years the prices have not moved, look at it this way: at 5% inflation, prices in real terms have actually gone down 5% every year.
Okay.
The second is the interest rate regime, which I have been talking. So, and this is not the low interest rate today; it is the transparent and the low interest rate regime. I think these are the two which should encourage or convince a person that okay, this makes good sense. The only thing I think one has to be careful about one's own affordability, which I think if one's job is stable, you're in a stable environment or a sector, I think this is one of the best times to go in for a real estate, which is owning a house.
Okay. So you are with buy on this one.
Absolutely.
Rajan, where do you stand?
Yeah, see, in the given conditions, when home loan rates, they are obviously at almost an all-time low, and there are builders who are offering good prices. There are discounts available in few of the cases, and then there are clear incentives being given by the state governments, right? In terms of stamp duty reduction, there are circle rates which have been brought down. So we are already witnessing a lot of demand coming in to buy new houses, right? So as a real estate transaction advisory firm, we feel that it's just a matter of time when we will start seeing some kind of an uptick in prices also. So in fact, in few of the selective locations, it has already started happening. So from buying perspective, I think it definitely does make sense. But I'm not totally against renting also. See, ultimately, in case it's a purely financial decision, then it needs to be based on certain calculations also, right? So the calculation, the way somebody has to do is somebody needs to understand in case there is an outright outlay which I'm doing in terms of buying a house, giving some down payment, and then having overheads in terms of maybe doing my furnishing, getting my utility connections, and maybe paying stamp duty. So if the return on these things is kind of better in comparison to an alternate investment where I can put this money in, then that decision needs to be evaluated in line with that. And obviously, also one needs to calculate the difference between the EMIs and the rent which somebody would be paying. So any excess expenditure on going towards that also needs to be accounted for when the returns are being calculated. So that's how somebody can arrive at a decision like which investment is going to be better for.
Yeah. Now, Sanjay, Rajan, I'd also like, before I move on to the audience questions, because we have a lot of audience questions and we're going to try and take up as many as possible. Now, just as a lay person, if I'm just trying to evaluate to myself that am I ready to buy a home financially, tell me what kind of corpus should a person have, no matter which segment he is looking at, no matter which salary bracket he comes within. What kind of a corpus should he already have in hand for him to have the confidence that, yes, I am now ready to buy a home?
Sure.
Sanjay, what do you think?
So, Jhumur, we clearly believe that home buying is not an event, it's a journey. And the journey starts at least 2 years before you actually get onto that event.
Okay.
And so just to give you a number, let's say I want to buy a house and the cost of the property is about 75 lakhs.
Okay.
My contribution is about 20%. So that's close to about 15 lakhs. Rajan explained that you want to do a basic do up in your house. That's another 10 lakhs. So 15 and 10, 25 lakhs is what you need as upfront your investment. Then we are talking about a 60,000 installment every month, which you need to take care of. So which means that if you have a salary of about 1 lakh and you think that from an affordability perspective, you can take 60,000 out for your EMI and 40,000 is good enough to be running your household. And you have this 15 plus 10, so 25 lakhs. And this is the basic. I'm not considered here the stamp duty and registration, which is another 5%. If you have that basic down payment and that cost which is required to enter into a house, that's the calculation that one needs to do. But I'm very firm on this and that this is not, and if I want to buy a house today, I should have started the journey at least 3 years back, if not more.
Yeah. So, Rajan, you're representing one of the largest real estate advisory firms in the country. So, obviously, you've had to give this advice, to a lot of prospective home buyers. So, what do you tell them? How should they evaluate, whether they are financially ready to take this step?
Yeah, see, it's a very good question. And this is a question which crosses everyone's mind before you finalize a decision to buy a house. See, depending on the income levels, see, banks also allow you to take a certain loan amount, which is the maximum possible loan amount you're eligible for. And even brokers, most of the times, they will also push you to buy a property which is the highest in the overall lineup that you would have selected for yourself.
Yeah.
But as a consumer or so as a buyer, so one has to evaluate what is good for me, right?
Yeah.
So what goes in my favor? So one must make an assessment on like how big a house is something which I can afford. Right. So I agree with the Sanjay's point of view when he says so 20% is the down payment which one needs to have immediately. And beyond that, also there are so many expenses. Right. So even if we put say 10 percentage points towards that, then 30% is the minimum corpus which to my mind somebody needs to have before they take a decision towards it.
Yeah.
And also, so as I had mentioned earlier, see, from a sustainability perspective, also, what is important to know is whether I have the stability of income to even service those EMIs or not. Right. So taking a loan is easy, but now this loan is going to run for 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
So that kind of a perspective also needs to be brought in. So financial experts, generally what they recommend is that if, even from EMI point of view, not more than 30% of your income should be going towards EMIs. Which can include your maintenance part of it also. And so once you have that kind of a money, I think you are all set to buy in a house.
Yeah. So Sanjay, Rajan seems to have preempted, one of my audience questions. So I'm going to read that to you. I'd like your take on this matter as well, because we've had a lot of audience members, write to us, on similar lines. So clearly it's a concern in people's minds. So Dhairashil Patil is asking that in the current situation, is it profitable to purchase a new house when the income is absolutely shrinking and it is unpredictable for professionals? Now, I think, the whole job market situation, it has to be factored in majorly in this whole rent versus buy, situation. So what is the advice, that you would like to give to people who are facing this question?
Right. So, Jhumur, absolutely. Very, very valid question, especially in the current environment. So, like I said, if my EMI is, if my salary is 1 lakh, the bank can give me a loan up to where the EMI is about 65,000. I think I should be prudent that in the current environment, instead of 65,000, I should look at an EMI not more than 55,000.
Yeah.
So that's the prudence that I need to show. And it's not just about job loss. It's about reduction in salaries and reduction in income, and maybe some medical exigencies that people could be wanting to manage. So I think from that perspective, one needs to be a little more prudent, and hence the leverage that one takes or one's own contribution should be a little higher. And hence, if your own corpus is in the current environment, increase your own corpus rather than taking a higher amount of loan. So if somebody is pushing you, like the regulatory norm is 80%, rather go for 70% or 75%. However, I'm assuming that you belong to a sector and your job is pretty stable. If that is not, then my suggestion is stay away, because this is going to be the largest asset you will ever own in your life. So if there is any instability that you see in your income right now, please stay away from buying this asset. And it makes then much more sense to be on rent till the time stability comes in your job.
Yeah. So I'd like to shift gears a little. It's very interesting, a lot of our audience questions actually seem to have come in from our older set of, like home buyers, prospective home buyers. Now, the reason why I find this very encouraging is because, a lot of our conversations of late, they revolve around the younger set of home buyers. I understand, the median age is reducing. We have more and more millennial home buyers coming in, but I think it's also important to remember that before a decade or so, traditionally, a lot of people were still buying their homes closer to retirement or, post retirement. And while the trend it may not be a large trend currently, but it clearly is around. So there are a couple of audience questions, around this, which I'd like to take up, because I think a lot of our audience members would find this useful. So Hiranya Jyoti Hazarika is asking that buying a flat with home loan with tenure 25 years at the age of 56 years, what's it result in? What would the and what suggestion would you give me? So I think he's trying to ask whether at that age he should be going in for such a long tenure home loan. Sanjay, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah,
Would
sure.
he get that home loan?
Right. So it would be difficult, and
Okay.
the bank will have to customize it. So
Okay.
generally, because the income flow, I'm assuming the income flow is not as stable as it was before the person retired. But I think the point here is that real estate buying needs to be a part of retirement planning.
Wow.
It should not be the other way around.
Okay.
It should not be that your retirement planning is separate and your real estate buying is separate.
Okay.
So first and I think India is at a stage where people are retiring pretty early. So I would rather stress on the retirement planning and be very clear. So whatever your costs are pre-retirement, they are going to be the same or actually go up.
Yeah.
And the income suddenly dries. So the question that you need to say is that your expenses were 40,000 a month. They are going to be 40,000 a month even after one retires. The income, which was, let's say, 1 lakh a month, that is suddenly going down to zero. So have you taken care of that? Have you made provisions for that? Do you have enough assets which can continue to give you 1 lakh of income after you retire? If the answer is yes, there is no problem in going ahead and buying a house. However, if the answer is no, then first fix that rather than thinking of buying a house.
Yeah. Rajan, there's a similar question that I'd like to bring in, and I'd like you to take that up. So Gomati A asks, I'm 50 plus and single. Now I'm in a government accommodation. I don't have my own house. I have to look for a house with home loan. So I'm not clear whether to stay in rent or own my house with EMI after retirement. I'm sure this is again a question, that a lot of older people are asking. On the face of it, what advice can we give Gomti? What do you think would be a safer choice?
See, again, so completely in sync with Sanjay's views. See, at this life stage, it's not that one should not look at buying a house, but again, this decision is very difficult one. Right. So because from your eligibility perspective, also, in case you are looking for a loan, that itself becomes a challenge. And secondly, there are other priorities which should kind of take precedence over buying a home at this particular stage. See, ultimately, once we invest in a real estate, it's an illiquid asset, right? So it's not like a liquid investment that you do and you can pull out of it at any given point in time.
Yeah.
Right. So in case this kind of an investment, it is coming at the cost of some other interest that you would want to pursue at this particular life stage, then it's definitely a no-go. You should definitely not buy it. So what you should also evaluate is that whether my retirement corpus, which should otherwise would have helped me in terms of my future sustenance, taking care of my health needs or any contingencies which I may have in future, is being used for one lump sum investment, then clearly I don't think it's an advisable decision to be taken.
Okay. There is one last question, on this line, because it's also specific to a city. So I'd like to take it up. So Krishnamurthy Nichina Metla is asking that I'm getting retired in June 2022. I'm planning to settle in Hyderabad. Right now, I do not have any flat or plot. Even a simple 3 BHK costs rupees 75 lakhs. So as per this, half of my earnings will go if I purchase. So please suggest. I think this is again a very interesting question. You obviously gave us the answer in terms of it's absolute no if all your corpus is going to go into buying a home. How about if half of your corpus is going? Is that something you can look at, or would you say that there's still a danger there?
I think, Jhumur, the point here is, let's say, so I'm assuming, since the person here said 75 lakhs is 50% of the corpus, let's assume the corpus is 1.5 crore. Okay. Now, the question is that the 75 lakhs that is left, is that sufficient? What Rajan is saying, is that sufficient to give you an income per month of what you require? Does that meet your needs?
Yeah.
And on your cost side, you can say, okay, my rent will be zero because I will. And here, I'm not suggesting or taking a loan. I'm saying outright purchase. Okay. So what you are taking care of is there will be no rent outflow. Okay. Versus what you're doing, you're taking this asset would be earning some revenue for you.
Okay.
You're taking that asset out and investing it into real estate. So that income will stop. But your rent will also not be required. So this is a simple calculation that he needs to do. Rent on one side, the income coming from the asset portfolio on the other side. If that rent minus the other one is lower, then go ahead. If it is not, stop.
So it's a simple calculation
Very
that
simple
will
calculation.
apply to any situation, irrespective of the corpus you have in hand, irrespective of the price of the home, that you're looking to buy.
I think one more point that I want to add is that whatever corpus he has created is giving him returns. And if let's say it is giving him, now we say the opportunity cost is 10%. But the point is that where do I invest to get a 10% return to? Yeah. If let's say he's retired, where does he put his money? Stock market?
Yeah.
Yes, no. Mutual funds, equity? Yes, no. Fixed deposit? Yes, no. And what does he get there? So fixed deposit, he gets 4.5%, 5%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stock market, is he the right profile? Does he want to take that amount of risk? So I think that is the question that he will have to answer, that even if that 1.5 crore I put aside, it may not give me any revenues or any returns.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that 10% is like not necessarily true in the current market environment, looking at his profile.
Yeah. So, this is again a very relevant point. We've had a couple of questions on these lines. A lot of people have asked, that if I'm in a situation like this, then should I go ahead with a second house? Rajan, I'd like to start with your thoughts. In this market, a second home, how do you think they should approach, this purchase?
It again all depends on the end objective. So if somebody has surplus funds, which one would want to deploy in an investment, real estate being the most tangible one definitely qualifies for that.
Okay.
Yeah. So also if you're doing it for self-use, as many people have been doing off late, it shouldn't be a bad choice. And so most of the demand, these days, Jhumur, so what we are receiving is coming from either serious end users or either moving out from rental accommodation or people who are upgrading their existing living standards. So somebody like moving into 3-bedroom house, choosing it over a 2-bedroom, which they're already living in. And the third very prominent category of buyers is where people want to get a second home away from the hustle and bustle of cities.
Yeah.
Right. So especially due to this work from home concept, so people are preferring to stay at such locations where they are enjoying nature. They are also keeping regular with the work. Right. Yeah. So this category is showing a lot of traction. So we have projects in Goa, Kasauli, and few such places where people are showing total preference in terms of buying their second homes. Right. Yeah. And such places, where people have bought their second homes for extra space, during the pandemic. So even the prices have appreciated. Right. Because all of a sudden, small place, limited inventory, limited supply, and a lot of demand. Right. So they have quickly risen also. And it's turning out to be a very good investment option. So in case somebody is making up his mind in order to buy it, yes, of course, it's a good investment option. You should go in for that. But one thing which needs to be kept in mind is that post-pandemic, if the demand dries up and in case this remote work concept, it binds down, then we could see even prices stagnating or coming down.
So it's interesting you mentioned this, because I'm looking at this question from Siddharth Agarwal, and I'm going to take this up, because I'm sure even though he's mentioned his location, but I think the situation that he finds himself in, it's something that a lot of our audience members will be able to relate to. So Siddharth Agarwal is asking, if someone's job is transferable, say I'm based in Himachal and for progressive development, I move to a metro, is it advisable to then get a home in Himachal? I think this is a very good question, like, should I live on rent in the big city, have have my own home back in my place, or should it be the other way around? I know a lot of people, who are facing this dilemma or question or whatever you may ask. Rajan, I'll start with you. How do we evaluate, this big city versus a smaller town? If I have to choose, how do I choose?
If Siddharth has recently moved to a bigger city, obviously, so I'm assuming that the job is very new. Right. Okay. So one has to first kind of live in that particular city, whether he would like to be here for long or not. Okay. So that will take care of his decision whether he needs to buy it in that particular city or not. Right? Okay. And as far as his preference for his hometown is concerned, that again depends on the end objective. Right.
Okay.
So if he is trying to buy a house because he would want to invest something back in his hometown and which he may come back to eventually, then it needs to be again considered whether it is a financial perspective or an emotional one. So as we were talking about initially, you see most of the house buying decisions, they have an emotional angle also attached to it. Right. So if somebody is financially stable, emotionally kind of prepared for it, then go ahead. One must buy.
Okay. Sanjay, there's a interesting question from one of our Mumbai audience members. I'd like you to take it up. So, just a moment. Bal Mukund Bhatt is asking that when the rental is 2% of the total property value without any other responsibilities in a city like Mumbai, is it not suicide to buy at 9% EMI with the hanging sword of paying the EMI and the fear of a bubble burst? Now, I think this is, especially in cities like Mumbai, right? We always talk about, the rental returns versus the cost of the property versus, what I'm paying for home finance. Purely from a financial mathematics point of view, how should one take this decision? How do they stack up against each other?
Absolutely. So I think if I were to, one simple number I can give to this gentleman, and this number he can use for all his calculations. So rental yields across the country are between 2 to 3%. And that's how, and India is a low rental yield because the capital cost of property is high in India. The number that you can refer to is between 8 to 8.25. If that's the appreciation on the property that you get over 10 years per annum, go ahead and buy.
Okay.
And put it on rent or stay yourself. If your appreciation, and this is pure financial, there is no emotional, nothing, no capital preservation. This is pure a number because he's asked a specific question. He's referring to a rental yield. The number is 8.25, and on the cost side, what it takes care of, that if you buy that house, you pay for maintenance, you pay the EMI, there's an opportunity cost because there's a down payment. You made that money could have been used elsewhere versus what you are doing if you're on rent is just the rental. So, or either you're receiving a rent or paying a rent. So the number is 8.25. If 8.25 is the appreciation on your property, and I'm saying 10 years, because real estate is coffee can investment. So put it in a coffee can and stay there. Don't look at it like a Sensex sticker every month and every 6 months and every year. It's a 10-year investment. If you're ready for a 10-year investment, if you don't want to exit, if you don't need that money in the next 4 years, 5 years, don't look at rental yields, look at capital appreciation. Bombay, rental yields are low because capital appreciation used to be very high. So that's a number he can refer to.
There's a similar question since we are on the topic, Sanjay. I'd like to take this one up as well. So Roshan Lal Kashkari is asking that I own a flat which is over 10 years old. It costs over rupees 1 crore. I'm interested in selling it. Now, can you advise me whether I should purchase a new residence or live on rent after, this whole amount? So that's an interesting question, right? A lot of people ask this. Again, how do you evaluate your finances?
So if let's say the person here is an emotional person like me, then sell this house, buy another house. If you want to sell this house because I'm assuming this is a smaller house and you want to buy a bigger house, or you want to buy a smaller house because from a functionality, you had a larger family, you have a smaller family right now. So go ahead and take that decision, bigger house or smaller house, but have your own house.
Okay.
I think that's clearly, if it's a person like me. And depending upon the stage of life you are at. So I don't think this is a decision. Don't look at the current prices. Don't look at what's happened in the real estate in the last 3 years. And don't take a decision of selling your house because of what has happened in the real estate market in the last 3 years or 4 years in Bombay.
Okay. So, Rajan, I'd like to move to a couple of buy-specific questions. I know we're doing rent versus buy, but we've received a lot of questions about, where can I buy this, where can I buy? So I thought it would be interesting to pick up a few of them. So, Govind Bhai Makwana is asking that I wish to purchase a new luxurious 4 BHK furnished flat with full amenities in New CG Road, Chandkheda or Moderator in Ahmedabad. What suggestions can we give him, Rajan?
For a luxury house purchase, I can recommend one option to, I forgot the name,
Yeah, it's
to
Mr.
Govind Bhai.
Makwana.
Yeah, Mr. Makwana. So I can recommend one option at the junction of New CG Road and Chandkheda. So
Okay.
the project's name is Pebble Bay, and it's being constructed by Kavisha Buildcon. And so it's a 4 BHK apartment around say 2,700 square feet roughly, and the price would hover in the range of 1.3 to 1.4 crores approximately. And the apartments, these are unfurnished apartments, but that's the only 4 BHK option available in the given vicinity. There would be multiple other options also within 2-3 kilometer radius, but none of them would be a 4 BHK. Right. So to my mind, I think this can be a good option to be looked at. And the project is good. Yeah. So it's exactly situated on the junction of this new CG Road and Mutera. And it's at a walking distance from BRT as bus stop and metro station. And both airport and railway station, they would be at a 15-minute distance. So to my mind, I think this can be one project you can look at.
All right. We also have a question from Hyderabad. So Satyanarayan Rao Saladi is asking that I'm interested to buy an apartment in Hyderabad, a 3 BHK within rupees 75 lakhs. So what kind of options would he have in the Hyderabad market?
Yeah, see, Hyderabad prices have very quickly appreciated. So, and most of the projects, they are beyond the range which Mr. Saladi has mentioned. But I can still recommend him Purvankara project at Attapur. Right? So it's named as Provident Kenworth. So it's an affordable luxury housing concept project from Purvankara, which is almost ready for possession. Right? So it will fall within the budget that he has mentioned. So in this budget, he may get a 2-bedroom or a slightly 2+1 kind of a space. And alternatively, so he can also go in for Indus PBEL city project at Appa Junction. Right? So it also starts at 75 lakhs kind of a range. And in case he would want to go in for a little bigger apartment, sizing around 1,300 square feet, so that will cost him around 1 crore. And also there is another option which is under construction option from Brigade. The project is named at Citadel and it is at Moti Nagar, and it will also fall in the same price bracket which Mr. Saladi has mentioned. So you may what you may do is you can either visit these developers' sites directly in order to get more information, or maybe you can visit our digital platform also, which is at direct.proptiger.com in order to get more information on this.
All right. There's an interesting question from Chiranjit Mishra. Now, this sort of brings in the under construction aspect of things, which is why I'd like to take up this question. So Chiranjit is asking that I'm 31 years old and married. Is it better to move into a ready-to-move-in flat and save on rent, or continue in a rented place for an apartment which will be ready to move in the next 2 to 3 years? Now, again, it's a financial calculation that you're making, right? Sanjay, what do you think? What advice can be given? What do you think makes financial sense right now?
Yeah, so 31 is a decent age to be owning a property. And while what RERA has done in the last few years is that the developer risk has significantly come down. So the under construction risk is significantly down right now. And there are provisions in which the consumer is well protected. The legal entangles are not very long. Resolutions are very quick. So from a safety net perspective, under construction is much comfortable right now. However, if the difference is 5-10%, he's at the real estate prices are much better. If he goes for a ready-made property today, there are developers who can sit across, he can negotiate, get a good bargain, and take an outright purchase rather than go for an under construction. That way, his risk is zero actually. So while under construction risk is lesser, but still there is a risk. So I would advise that going for a ready-to-move-in property, you are at your life stage where I think you can, if you can afford, go ahead and take an outright, negotiate with the developer. The interest rates are extremely low. Your eligibilities will be there. So go ahead and buy rather than take an under construction. But whether you're going under construction or ready to move in, be very clear the brand and the kind of developer that you're going with. That's extremely important.
Yeah. So, Rajan, what would your advice be to this person in this RTMI versus under construction? What are you batting for in this market condition?
See, there is clearly an increased preference towards completed or nearing completion projects. Yeah, people would want to kind of get possession as quickly as possible. As most of the buyers, they are always cautious about the risks which are associated with the delayed projects. Right. So any investment calculation which I and Sanjay have been suggesting, so it goes for a toss the moment there is a delivery risk. Right. Okay. So in case that house is not delivered right on time, your entire calculation would be kind of totally disturbed. So it's good to go in for an RTMI house if the price difference is not too much. But at the same time, see, the ongoing trend today is that people are preferring even under construction projects. See, the overall contribution of under construction projects, it has gone up over the last 1 year. See, earlier RTMI projects, they used to contribute significantly higher, but we have seen a sharp fall of around 5 to 7% over the last quarter itself. Right. So there is a clear preference amongst buyers for under construction properties, and especially because they are offering a huge scope for price appreciation also in RTMI. So that also gets capped to a certain extent because they have fully appreciated also to that extent.
Yeah. So, Sanjay, we may not have any questions from audience members right now, but I think it's also important to speak about the resale part of things. So, in this RTMI, under construction and resale, in terms of people who are coming to you for, home finance, can you give us some indication where are people gravitating towards, and where does resale sort of factor into all this?
Right. So, Jhumur, in all the major metros, we're seeing an uptick on queries and our customers coming back to us for resale transactions.
Okay.
So, just to give you a number, that's gone up like 2 times. And I'm talking in the last 6 to 8 months. I think what would have, and we are realizing that even if there's the price leverage that he gets is about 5 to 10% over what, let's say, he buys from the developer. There's a merit for an individual to buy from an investor rather than a developer. I think that's while we clearly do not know, but I think most of these we are seeing a huge trend in moving towards this as a market. The other thing, I think a lot of people who had invested in real estate over, let's say, last 10 years, I think they would have also decided that maybe this is the time to exit, or maybe get into some other asset class. Maybe exit out of an investment and buy a house for own use. I think some of the people here, for example, we talked about government employees, government people who had been staying in government quarters, and let's say they had a 2 BHK which they had put on rent. Now today they would want to sell that and come out of their government quarters, or if they are retiring or they have larger families, and start buying their own houses. So you have buy and sell on both sides on this side. So we are seeing a big uptrend on that, other than the ready to move in and direct from developers. And this is mainly we are seeing in the main metros.
Yeah. So there's one more question. I know we've touched a bit of these aspects, earlier, but I still think, it's an important question, and it's, from Kolkata. Now, I know we haven't spoken about that part of the market at all, so I'd like to pick that up. So Devabrata Ghosh is asking, I'm in Kolkata in a rental flat, chosen a flat to purchase, but meanwhile, I got an opportunity in HDFC and I'm moving outside Kolkata to a small town. I assume I should be there for maximum 3 years. Now, HDFC will provide me a 25 lakh loan at 2%. My question is, should I purchase the flat in Kolkata and stay in rent in a small town, or should I purchase the flat in that small town or in my hometown where I should not return back ever, but at least I can lease out for rent? Now, this is, again, it's an interesting calculation. So how does one make this calculation?
So I think what the gentleman here is referring to is a staff loan. That is why the 2% is coming. That's a subsidy that the bank is giving. So I think the loan should come second, and the reason to buy a house should be first. Loan should not be the reason to buy the house.
Even if it is coming free, is so low.
I think even if it is coming free, be very clear. It's a capital outlay. And this is going to be the biggest asset class. So I think, depending upon how he sees his career progression, does he want to come back to Calcutta after 3 years? Then it makes sense taking in Calcutta. Otherwise, stay put in your current wherever you have moved to. see how I think Rajan has explained this, see how your career is going 1 year, 2 year down the line. But my suggestion is your first house should be the house that you stay in. Okay. Even if you need to start planning it right now. Okay. So if let's say you have moved to Bombay and you know that Bombay property is much expensive and you're not wanting to buy that right now because you think the affordability is not there, start planning for it right now rather than buying a property which is affordable, because eventually you need a property to stay in.
All right. Rajan, there are quite a few buy questions, so I'd like to take up one more at least. Now, Hemant Singh is asking for kindly help for a 2 or 3 BHK purchase in Noida up to 75 lakhs to 1 crore range. And can you please advise to go for ready to move in house versus under construction? And I think because this is the NCR market, Rajan, I'm curious to sort of know what advice you'll be giving Hemant Singh. So what can we tell Mr. Singh?
Yeah, see, Noida is one market which is seeing a lot of activity. Yeah. And there are very good corporate reputed developers who have entered this space now. See, earlier Noida used to be known by small-time builders. So there was not even one single big name which used to kind of operate from there.
Yeah.
So clearly, in case those are the kind of projects which he would want to opt for, then he should pick up an RTMI project with no delivery risk at all. We know so many projects which are already either in the liquidation or under litigation. Right, so those projects are completely avoidable if he gets a house wherein the keys are handed over to him on day one. So that's a preferable choice. But as I mentioned, there are quite a few very good names like Godrej. Then we have Prestige, we have Ace. So these names, they are already entering Noida market. So they have quite a few projects which are under construction, and they offer a good potential for future appreciation also. So depending on how much investment this gentleman would want to put in, and how long-term a plan he has in order to kind of create an investment for himself, or in case he would want to kind of live into that particular apartment, he can choose it either.
All right. Now, in the interest of time, I'll move into my last question. I'm going to choose a very interesting audience question by Anand Jathar, because I think his question sort of touches upon, buying, renting, second apartment, everything. The question has been broken up into 2 parts. So I'd like both Rajan and Sanjay to share their inputs. Anand Jathar is first asking, is it a good idea to sell the current property and put the money in another investment avenue and then stay on rent? Now, again, this is a question, Sanjay, people are asking, right? Because what if I put it in the stock market, will I make faster returns, So how, again, how do you evaluate, when you're not in a financial bind and you do have the money to sort of experiment?
So, Jhumur, it's the so the gentleman needs to evaluate the kind of risk he is ready to take. It is not as if he puts money in the stock market and it will double in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Right. And we have seen that over last 10 years, 15 years, it is not every 3 years somebody puts in the money. It's not that you get 20-30% return. So I think the big question is that you're talking about 2 different asset classes. One is real estate, which is real. It exists. You can do something with it. You don't need to liquidate. It can give you revenues. It can be your safeguard. It can be your savior. It may not give you the returns that the stock market can give you. Okay, but it is a safe asset class. You want your 1 crore to be protected. It will not suddenly vanish. Now you're talking about putting that money into an asset class which is risky, where you can have a 50% erosion in 6 months' time.
All right.
So that's the question that one needs to ask. Do you want to take that risk? Yes, no. If you're not ready for that risk, then obviously you should not do that. If you are ready to take that risk and say, okay, I will take that in a calculated way. I'm okay if I lose 10, 20, 30% of my principal. Then go ahead and take that decision.
All right.
If it is pure financial. However, if it is emotional, because the moment you start staying on rent, there'll be other issues involved. There'll be rentals. The rentals could appreciate. There are rental. While there's a tenancy act which will come into place hopefully very soon. The rentals also appreciate. It is not the rental that I'm getting in is the rental that I will stay for the next 3 or 4 years. So I think you are moving from a position of certainty to a position of uncertainty and unpredictability. If you're okay with it, go ahead. If you don't want so much of uncertainty and unpredictability, stay in your own house and don't take this gamble.
Yeah. Rajan, there's a second part of this question. Now he's asking that is it advisable to buy a second home if I have to buy it on loan? So what are your thoughts on buying a second home but with home finance?
Yeah, see, again, I'll say the same thing, so which we have touched upon earlier. See, it all depends on the end objective. So if one has surplus funds and then as a down payment, so that's readily available, all I need to do is I need to take a loan on top of it and then start servicing my EMIs.
Okay.
Then somebody should go ahead and invest into the second home also, in case it's about the loan. Right. But otherwise, see, one has to evaluate what will I be using this second home for. If it is for my personal living, if it is something like which I tried mentioning earlier, so if it kind of takes me away from the hustle and bustle of the city, and then I'm enjoying the nature also, and I'm still keeping up with my work, then it's again a very good option. But in case it is like financially stretching myself in order to buy a second home, and then in case the evaluation happens purely on the investment perspective, then I should look at the appreciation part of it.
All right.
Right. So if the financial stability is there and the returns expectations are better in comparison to any other investment that this gentleman can make, then obviously then he should invest into a second home. But since the question is coming with an asterisk that there is a loan required here, it needs to be taken very, very cautiously. Right? Yeah.
So I think we've had a great discussion. What I've understood from both of you is it doesn't matter whether you are currently on rent or not. Even if you're living on rent, your long-term goal ideally should be to own your own home, because that has far more pros, than cons. So thank you for the great message. We were able to take up a lot of audience questions, so I'm really happy for that. Thank you, audience members, for sending us such fantastic questions. That's all that we have the time for today, but we will see you soon. Thank you so much for joining us. Till we see you again, stay safe and stay healthy. Bye-bye.